In a small American town, a poor black student faces daily struggles at school. His teachers look down on him. Classmates whisper behind his back, and opportunities seem out of reach. One teacher, in particular, insults him in front of the whole class, making him feel worthless. But unknown to everyone, this boy has been working quietly on a science project that no one expects. What starts as humiliation slowly turns into a story that shakes the entire school. Before we continue, let us know in the comments where you are watching from today and what time you are currently watching this video. If you enjoy stories like this, make sure to like, share, and subscribe for more. The autumn sun in Maplewood, a mid-sized American town, shone lazily over Jefferson High School. The red bricks of the building carried years of history, but for many students inside, each day felt like a new test of survival. Among those students was a 14-year-old boy named Marcus Johnson. Marcus was quiet, often blending into background, but not because he lacked ideas or energy. He simply knew that standing out usually brought more pain than praise. Marcus lived on the east side of town, in a neighborhood most teachers at Jefferson High never visited. His mother, Tanya, worked 2 jobs at a diner and a laundromat, barely keeping the lights on at home. His father wasn't around, and Marcus had long stopped waiting for him to return. Their small apartment was noisy from the traffic outside, and sometimes cold in the winter, because the heating bill was too high to pay. But Marcus never complained. He had learned early on that life wasn't fair, and complaining didn't change anything. That Tuesday morning, Marcus walked into his 8th grade science class, wearing his usual hand-me-down hoodie. His shoes had frayed laces, and his backpack had a small tear near the zipper. He sat at the back of the room, near the window, hoping to escape the sharp eyes of his teacher, Mr. Whitaker. Mr. Whitaker was a tall man in his 50s with a stern face that rarely softened. He had been teaching for nearly 25 years, but instead of mellowing with time, his patience had thinned. He had a reputation for being harsh, especially towards students he thought weren't trying hard enough. And for reasons Marcus could never understand, Whitaker seemed to have singled him out. As the bell rang, Whitaker strode into the room, carrying a stack of papers. His voice cut through the chatter of the students. "Settle down, everyone. Today, we're talking about the science fair projects. They're due in 4 weeks, and I want no excuses." A groan went through the class. Science fair was a big deal at Jefferson High. Winning meant recognition, sometimes scholarships, and even small cash prizes. But it also meant buying materials, investing time, and getting support from home. Not every student had those things, and Marcus knew he was one of them. Whitaker continued, "Some of you will rise to the occasion. Others—" He paused, scanning the room until his eyes landed on Marcus. "Well, let's just say some of you probably won't even bother." The room went quiet. Heads turned. Marcus stared at his desk, his ears burning. He felt the weight of 20 pairs of eyes on him. A few students snickered. "Mr. Johnson," Whitaker said, his tone dripping with disdain, "do you even have an idea for the science fair? Or will you be sitting this one out as usual?" Marcus swallowed hard. He wanted to disappear. His throat tightened, but he managed to speak. I'll do something, sir." Whitaker smirked. "I'll believe it when I see it. Science isn't cheap, Johnson. Maybe if you spend less time daydreaming and more time preparing, you might surprise us. Though I doubt it." The words cut deeper than Marcus wanted to admit. He clenched his fists under the desk, fighting back the heat rising in his chest. At lunch, he sat alone at the edge of the cafeteria. His friend Jamal slid onto the bench across from him. Jamal was one of the few people who understood him. "Man, don't let Whitaker get in your head. He's just bitter," Jamal said, ripping open a bag of chips. Marcus shook his head. "It's not just him. Everybody expects me to fail. They see my shoes, my clothes, where I live. They think I'm nothing." "But you're not nothing," Jamal said firmly. "You're smart. I've seen you fix stuff. Your old radio, that busted fan in your room. You think that's nothing?" Marcus didn't reply, but a thought sparked inside him. He had always liked tinkering with things, taking apart broken electronics people threw away, and try and make them work again. His mom called it his little experiments. What if he could turn that into something bigger? Something for the science fair? That night, after finishing his homework at the kitchen table, Marcus sat staring at a pile of junk he had collected. Wires, a cracked tablet, a small motor, and a flashlight with a missing cover. He didn't know what it would become, but he felt a strange energy in his chest. His mother walked in, tired for her shift at the diner. "You're still up?" she asked, dropping her purse onto the counter. "Yeah," Marcus said. "Just thinking." She looked at the mess of wires and broken gadgets. "As long as you don't blow up the apartment," she teased, though her smile was faint. "Get some rest, baby. Big dreams need sleep, too." Marcus nodded, but he stayed up another hour, sketching ideas on notebook paper. He didn't have money for fancy supplies, but he had determination, and maybe, just maybe, that would be enough. The next day at school, Whitaker called on Marcus again. "Mr. Johnson, do you finally have a project idea, or should I write you down for incomplete already?" Marcus lifted his chin. His voice was steady this time. I'm working on something, sir. Whitaker raised an eyebrow, amused. Something? Care to enlighten us? Marcus hesitated. He didn't want to reveal too much yet. It's not finished, but I'll show you when it's ready. The class laughed. Whitaker chuckled, shaking his head. I'll save a spot for your empty table at the fair. But Marcus wasn't laughing. For the first time, he felt a fire ignite inside him. He didn't just want to prove Whitaker wrong. He needed to. That night, he dug deeper into his junk pile. He borrowed books from the library, read about circuits and renewable energy, and started piecing together an idea that even he wasn't sure could work. The work was messy, frustrating, and exhausting. But with every connection made, every small spark of progress, he felt closer to something that could change everything. The days following Whitaker's insult felt heavier than usual for Marcus. He carried those words around like an extra weight in his backpack. Yet, strangely, that weight also kept pushing him forward. Every night after finishing his homework, Marcus returned to the small corner of the living room where his pile of broken gadgets waited. It wasn't much of a workshop, just a cracked wooden table and a chair that squeaked whenever he moved. Still, it became a space, the one place where he felt control. He tinkered with wires, batteries, and scraps, scribbling notes into his notebook. His idea was still blurry, but he was determined to make it real. On Friday, Jamal stopped by after school. Marcus had asked him to bring along an old portable fan that didn't work anymore. Jamal placed it on the table. Here, my mom was going to throw it out. Maybe you can use something inside. Marcus smiled faintly. Thanks, man. Every little part counts. Jamal looked at the mess of wires. So, what are you actually building? Marcus leaned back in his chair. I'm not sure yet, but I keep thinking, what if I could build something useful? Something that could help people, not just look fancy. Jamal raised an eyebrow. Like what? Marcus stared at the pieces. Something with power. Something that doesn't need money to run. That weekend, Marcus visited the local junkyard. He walked past rusted car doors, bent bicycles, and broken microwaves. The man who owned the yard, Mr. Earl, knew Marcus well. Back again, kid? He called from his chair. Yes, sir, Marcus said, just looking for parts. Mr. Earl chuckled. Take what you want from that corner, long as you don't hurt yourself. Marcus carefully searched through the piles until he found an old solar panel no bigger than a notebook, cracked on one side. His hands trembled with excitement. It wasn't much, but it was something. He tucked it under his arm and kept digging until he found some copper wire and a small motor. By the time he left, his backpack was heavier, but his hope was too. Back home, Marcus set the solar panel on the table. He stared at it like it was treasure. If he could fix it, maybe it could power a small device. That night, he read until his eyes burned, learning how solar energy worked and how circuits carried power. On Monday morning, school felt like a battlefield again. In science class, Whitaker started calling on students to share their project ideas. A tall boy named Ryan raised his hand. I'm building a model rocket. My dad's helping me order the parts online. Excellent, Whitaker said, nodding. That's the kind of ambition I like to see. Another girl, Emily, chimed in. I'm doing an experiment on how different fertilizers affect plant growth. Good, Emily, Whitaker said warmly. Then his eyes shifted. Marcus Johnson, care to share with the class? Marcus froze. His palms grew sweaty. He wasn't ready to reveal anything yet. I'm working on a project about energy, he said carefully. Energy? Whitaker repeated with a mocking smile. That's a big word, Johnson. You sure you're not biting off more than you can chew? The class laughed again. Marcus felt the familiar sting. But this time he forced himself to look up. I'll make it work, he said quietly. Whitaker shook his head. We'll see. The rest of the day passed in a blur. At lunch, Jamal patted Marcus on the shoulder. Man, don't let him get to you. You sounded serious. That's good. Marcus nodded, though his stomach was tight. If he failed, it wouldn't just be a project that collapsed. It would be proof, at least to Whitaker, that he was exactly what the teacher thought, a poor kid aiming too high. That night, Marcus worked harder than ever. He tried to reconnect wires on the solar panel, soldering the broken pieces carefully. He tested it with a small bulb from an old flashlight. At first, nothing happened. Frustrated, he slammed his fist on the table. His mother walked in, holding a mug of tea. What's wrong, baby? It doesn't work, Marcus said, his voice cracking. I don't have the right tools or the right stuff. Maybe Whitaker's right. Tanya sat beside him, placing her hand on his shoulder. Listen to me. Don't you ever let somebody decide what you can or can't do. You've been fixing things since you were little. You got a gift, Marcus. But gifts take patience. Nothing works the first time. Marcus wiped his eyes and looked at the broken bulb. He picked it up again, his hand steadier. Maybe I wired it wrong, he murmured. He tried again, this time connecting the wires differently. When he held the solar panel under the kitchen light, the tiny bulb flickered, just for a second, but enough to make his heart jump. He gasped, "Mom, did you see that?" Her eyes widened. "I did." She smiled. "That's your spark, baby. Don't stop now." For the next week, Marcus kept experimenting. Every flicker of light, every hum of the motor made him more determined. He borrowed more books, asked Jamal to bring whatever broken gadgets his neighbors wanted to throw away, and stayed up late sketching designs. But Whitaker didn't let up. Each time he passed Marcus's desk, he made some comment. "Still daydreaming, Johnson? Or, science fairs are for serious students." One afternoon, when Whitaker made a remark in front of class, Marcus felt the room tilt. He clenched his jaw and thought, "One day you'll see." As the deadline grew closer, Marcus began assembling his project into something more complete. He was building a small device that could generate and store power, something simple but useful. He didn't have the fancy materials other students had, but his invention carried something they didn't: necessity. The night before the school's mid-check, where students had to present their progress, Marcus stayed up until nearly 2 a.m. His mother found him asleep at the table, his head resting on his notebook, the half-built project glowing faintly under the dim kitchen light. She didn't wake him. She just pulled a blanket over his shoulders, whispered, "Keep fighting, baby," and turned off the light. Marcus had no idea what the next day at school would bring, but he knew one thing: he wasn't backing down. The morning of the science fair mid-check came with gray skies over Maplewood. The chill in the air carried the tension Marcus felt inside his chest. At Jefferson High, every student had to bring in a preview of their project for review. It wasn't the final presentation, but it was the moment when teachers and classmates got their first real look at what everyone had been working on. Marcus woke up early, earlier than usual. He carefully packed his project into his worn-out backpack. His device was still rough around the edges, made of mismatched wires, plastic casing from an old radio, and the solar panel he had patched up, but it worked. At least it worked last night. He prayed it wouldn't fail in front of everyone. "Got everything?" Tanya asked, sipping her coffee before leaving for her morning shift at the diner. "Yeah," Marcus said, his voice steady, though his hands were shaking. She bent down and kissed his forehead. "Remember, it doesn't matter what anyone else says. Just show them what you got." Marcus nodded and slung the backpack over his shoulder. At school, the hallways buzzed with chatter. Students carried colorful posters, neatly boxed models, and polished experiments. Marcus caught a glimpse of Ryan's model rocket, shiny and sleek, carefully cradled in his hands. Emily had trays of potted plants lined up in a cart, each one neatly labeled. Compared to theirs, Marcus's project looked like scraps taped together. He tried not to let the doubt sink in. In science class, Whitaker stood at the front, clipboard in hand. "All right, let's begin. Everyone will have 5 minutes to show where you are with your project. Remember, effort matters." Ryan went first. He placed his rocket on the desk and explained how it would be powered by a small fuel engine. Whitaker nodded approvingly. "Very ambitious. Well done." The class clapped politely. Next was Emily. She presented her plans and talked about the different fertilizers. Whitaker smiled warmly. "Clear, methodical. Good work, Emily." Then came Marcus. He carried his project to the front of the class, trying to ignore the snickers from the back. Whitaker raised an eyebrow. "Well, Mr. Johnson, let's see what treasure you've dug out of the trash." Laughter rippled through the room. Marcus set his device on the table, his ears burning. He took a deep breath and spoke. "This is a small energy generator. I'm using a repaired solar panel to power this motor and store energy in this battery." He flipped a switch. For a moment, nothing happened. His heart dropped. Then, slowly, the small bulb connected to the circuit flickered to life, glowing steadily. The laughter stopped. The room grew quiet. Marcus continued, his voice gaining strength. "The idea is simple. Even with broken or thrown away parts, you can still create energy. It could be useful in places where people can't afford power or need something cheap to light their homes." The glow from the bulb filled the silence. Marcus could feel every eye in the room on him. Whitaker scribbled something on his clipboard and smirked. "Interesting, but very rough. I suppose it's better than nothing." A few students clapped awkwardly, while others whispered to each other. Marcus picked up his project and returned to his seat, his chest pounding. Jamal leaned over and whispered, "That was dope, man. You lit that thing up in front of everybody." Marcus allowed himself the smallest smile. After class, Whitaker stopped him at the door. "Johnson," he said quietly. Marcus turned, bracing himself. "Don't get ahead of yourself. A blinking light won't win you the fair. You'll need much more than scraps to impress real judges." Marcus said nothing. He just tightened his grip on his backpack and walked away. At lunch, a few kids approached him. One of them, a girl named Sarah, said, "That was cool, Marcus. How'd you make it from junk?" Marcus shrugged. "Just trial and error." Another boy added, "Man, if you could make that better, you might actually have a chance." For the first time, Marcus felt something shift. People weren't just laughing anymore. They were curious. That evening at home, Marcus went back to work with renewed energy. He drew plans in his notebook, sketching improvements. He wanted the device to do more than just light a bulb. What if it could charge a phone or power a fan? He didn't know if it was possible with what he had, but he wanted to try. Over the next week, he experimented with connecting the solar panel to a small rechargeable battery he salvaged from an old toy. It was frustrating. Sometimes the battery held power, sometimes it didn't. But when he finally managed to charge his old flip phone for a few minutes using only the panel and wires, his heart leapt. "Mom!" he shouted. Tanya rushed into the room. "Look, it charged my phone. Just for a little bit, but it worked." She covered her mouth, her eyes shining. "Marcus, that's incredible." The next day at school, Jamal nearly jumped when Marcus told him, "Dude, you're making free power. That's insane." Marcus smiled. "Not insane. Just useful." As the science fair drew closer, Marcus kept improving the project. He built a simple wooden frame to hold the panel and enclosed the battery inside a box from an old lunch container. The device still looked homemade, but it worked. Meanwhile, Whitaker kept his usual tone. During class one day, he said loudly, "Remember, presentation matters as much as the science. Nobody wants to see a pile of junk at the fair." Marcus knew who he was talking about. He gritted his teeth but stayed focused. One afternoon, the principal, Mrs. Reynolds, walked into the science class during project time. She strolled around, looking at the students' work. When she reached Marcus's desk, she stopped. "What's this?" Marcus hesitated, then explained his device and turned it on. The bulb lit up and the small fan whirred to life. Mrs. Reynolds leaned closer. "You built this from recycled parts?" "Yes, ma'am," Marcus said nervously. She straightened, a thoughtful look on her face. "Very creative, Marcus. Keep at it." As she walked away, Whitaker's jaw tightened. That night, Marcus felt more driven than ever. He stayed up late, fine-tuning every detail. He wanted his project to speak louder than Whitaker's insults, louder than the doubts of his classmates. The fair was only 2 weeks away, and for the first time, Marcus wasn't just nervous. He was ready to fight for it. 2 weeks before the science fair, Jefferson High was buzzing. Posters went up in the hallways, announcing the date and inviting families from the community to attend. For the students, it was more than a fair, it was a chance to prove themselves. Marcus felt the pressure more than anyone. His project worked, but it still looked rough compared to the polished rockets, robots, and colorful displays his classmates were preparing. At night, he lay awake thinking, how can I make people take this seriously? One Saturday morning, Marcus carried his device outside to test it in real sunlight instead of the dim kitchen bulbs. He set the panel on the balcony railing of their apartment and waited. Slowly, the battery charged. When he connected it to the bulb, it glowed brighter than ever. Then he plugged in his old phone. It charged for 10 minutes before shutting off, but it worked. He shouted, "Yes," loud enough for the neighbors to look out their windows. His mother laughed from the doorway. "Looks like you're on to something big." Marcus grinned. "If I can get it more stable, maybe it can charge a phone completely. Imagine that power from trash." That afternoon, Jamal came over. Marcus showed him the progress. Jamal's eyes went wide. "Bro, this is crazy. Do you know how many people would want this? Kids like us who can't pay for new chargers, or folks whose power gets cut off." Marcus nodded. "That's why I want to work right. It has to last longer, not just a few minutes." The two of them spent hours brainstorming. Jamal wasn't a science kid, but he had ideas. What if you use something bigger to store the power? Like a stronger battery? Marcus sighed. "I don't have money for that." Jamal leaned back, thinking, "There's a junk shop near my uncle's house. They got all kinds of old stuff, batteries, radios, you name it. Maybe we can find something there." The next day after school, they biked across town to the junk shop. The air smelled like rust and oil, but Marcus felt like he was walking into treasure land. Shelves overflowed with broken appliances. In the corner, Marcus spotted a stack of old laptop batteries. He asked the owner, a gruff man with grease-stained hands, "How much for one of these?" The man squinted. "They don't even work anymore." "I just need one to try," Marcus said. The owner shrugged. "Take one. It's junk to me." Marcus thanked him, his heart racing as he slipped the battery into his backpack. Back home, he stayed up late testing it. After hours of trial and error, sparks, and dead ends, he finally managed to hook the solar panel to the laptop battery. When the bulb glowed and stayed lit longer than ever before, Marcus nearly jumped out of his chair. "Mom!" he yelled. Tanya walked in, wiping her hands on a towel. "It's working?" she asked. Marcus pointed to the light. "It's been on for 20 minutes, no flicker." Her eyes filled with pride. "That's my boy." Over the next week, Marcus refined the device. He built a wooden box around the battery and panel to make it look more like a real product instead of scraps. He sanded the edges, painted the box black with leftover paint from a neighbor, and labeled the switch and ports neatly with marker. Still, doubt nagged at him. He knew Whitaker would look for any chance to tear him down. One afternoon in class, Whitaker walked around, checking on progress. He stopped at Marcus's desk and eyed the wooden box. "What's this supposed to be?" he asked. Marcus answered calmly. "It's a solar-powered charging unit. It can power small devices." Whitaker chuckled. "From garbage? Johnson, let me give you advice. Judges want sophistication, not handyman work." A few students snickered. Marcus kept his eyes on his project. After class, Jamal said, "Forget him, man. You saw how Principal Reynolds looked at your project last time. You're on to something." Marcus nodded, but inside, the tension was building. The Friday before the fair, the school held practice presentations in the gym. Each student set up their project on folding tables while teachers walked around, pretending to be judges. Parents were not allowed yet, but the entire 8th grade was present. Marcus set his wooden box on his table. He had made a small sign that read, "Solar energy from recycled materials." Ryan's rocket tower beside him, shiny and sleek. Emily's display board was filled with charts and graphs. Marcus's project looked simple, almost plain. He could hear whispers. "Is that a shoebox?" someone muttered. "Looks like something my little brother made," another said. Marcus swallowed hard, his palms sweating. When it was his turn, he took a deep breath and began. "My project is about creating energy using recycled materials. I built the solar-powered unit from old parts. It can store energy and charge small devices like a phone." He flipped the switch. The bulb lit up brightly. Then he plugged in his old phone. It buzzed, showing the charging symbol. Gasps rippled through the crowd. Students leaned forward to see. Jamal grinned in the front row, whispering loudly, "That's what I'm talking about." Even some of the kids who usually ignored Marcus looked impressed. But Whitaker, standing at the back with his arms crossed, didn't clap. Instead, he scribbled something on his clipboard, his lips pressed into a thin line. After practice ended, a boy named Tyler came up to Marcus. "Hey, can you make one of those for me? My charger's always breaking." Marcus blinked. Maybe." For the first time, students weren't mocking him. They were interested. That night at home, Marcus felt a mix of pride and fear. He knew he had made progress, but the real fair would bring real judges, parents, and the whole school. If something went wrong, if the device failed even once, Whitaker would make sure everyone remembered it. He sat at the table, staring at the box. "Please don't fail me," he whispered to himself. The science fair was now just 1 week away. The week of the science fair arrived, and the whole school buzzed with excitement. The fair wasn't just an event for students. It was one of Jefferson High's biggest traditions. Families, local reporters, and even city officials came to watch. The gym would be packed, and everyone knew that the winners often received scholarships, prizes, and recognition beyond the school walls. For Marcus, the pressure grew heavier with each passing day. He tested his solar-powered unit every night, checking and rechecking the wiring, the switch, and the battery. Sometimes it worked perfectly, charging his phone for nearly an hour. Other times the wires loosened and the current broke. "Come on," Marcus muttered one evening, sweat beading on his forehead as the bulb refused to light. He tore the wires apart, reconnected them, and tried again. This time the bulb glowed steadily. Relief washed over him, but he knew one small slip during the fair could ruin everything. His mother noticed the tension in his face. "Baby, you're wearing yourself out. Don't forget to breathe." "I can't afford to mess up, Mom," Marcus said. "Everyone's waiting for me to fail, especially Whitaker." She placed her hand on his shoulder. "Then you give them the opposite. But remember, no matter what happens, you already proved something to yourself." Her words helped, but Marcus still felt the pressure. The night before the fair, Jamal came over. He leaned against the table, munching on chips while watching Marcus adjust wires. "Bro, you gotta relax. You've done more with junk than most kids do with brand new stuff. Tomorrow's your moment." Marcus looked up. "What if it doesn't work? What if it dies right in front of everyone?" Jamal smirked. "Then you pick it up and fix it again. Right there. Show him you're not scared. People respect fight." Marcus considered this. Jamal wasn't wrong. He'd been fixing things his whole life. If something failed, he knew how to get it running again. But still, he wanted everything perfect. The morning of the fair, Marcus woke up before sunrise. He carefully packed a wooden box into his backpack, wrapping it in towels so it wouldn't rattle. He dressed in his cleanest clothes, still worn but neat. His mom gave him a hug before he left. "You're gonna shine today," she whispered. At school, the gym was already buzzing. Rows of tables were set up, each decorated with colorful trifold boards, models, and polished displays. Students stood nervously by their projects while families and visitors began filing in. Ryan's rocket gleamed under the lights, with diagrams and pictures on a giant display board. Emily's plans were arranged neatly, each labeled with bright tags. Marcus carried his box to his table at the far end of the gym. His display board was simple. White poster paper with hand-drawn diagrams and words in black marker. Compared to the others, it looked plain, almost bare. He felt the stares. "Is that a wooden box?" a boy muttered as he passed. Marcus ignored it, setting up carefully. He tested the switch quickly. Yes, the bulb lit up. He let out a breath. The fair began with the principal's speech. Mrs. Reynolds welcomed the parents, thanked the sponsors, and reminded the judges, local engineers, science teachers from nearby schools, and even a city councilman that creativity mattered as much as polish. One by one, judges visited the tables. They nodded at Ryan's rocket, asked Emily about her fertilizers, and scribbled notes on clipboards. Marcus's stomach twisted when he saw them approaching his corner. He wiped his palms on his jeans and stood straighter. The lead judge, a tall man with glasses, stopped at his table. "And you are Marcus Johnson," he said quietly. "Tell us about your project, Marcus." Marcus opened his box, revealing the solar panel and wiring. His voice shook at first, but as he explained, confidence grew. "I built this solar-powered charging unit from recycled parts. Most of it came from broken electronics people threw away. It can store energy in this battery and power small devices." He flipped the switch. The bulb glowed brightly. Then he plugged his phone. It buzzed, showing the charging symbol. The judges leaned in, surprised. One of them, a woman in a navy suit, asked, "You built this from discarded materials? No new parts?" "Yes, ma'am," Marcus said. "Just old parts one found or repaired." The judges exchanged glances. The man with glasses asked, "What made you think of this idea?" Marcus hesitated, then spoke honestly. "Because sometimes people can't afford new things. But that doesn't mean they don't need power. I wanted to prove you can make something useful out of what everyone else calls trash." For a moment, the judges were silent. Then the woman smiled. "Very impressive." They scribbled notes and moved on. But Marcus noticed something. Some parents and students who had walked past earlier now circled back to look at his project again. Jamal, watching from the side, gave him a thumbs up. Still, Marcus knew Whitaker was somewhere in the crowd, watching closely. He couldn't shake the feeling that the teacher was waiting for him to slip up. Sure enough, when Whitaker passed by, he paused and muttered just loud enough for Marcus to hear. "Neat trick, Johnson. But tricks don't win competitions. Real science does." Marcus clenched his jaw, but didn't answer. As the day went on, more people stopped by his table. Some asked questions. Others just watched the bulb glow and the phone charge. A father whispered to his son, "That's genius. Imagine if we had one of those during the blackout last summer." Hearing that made Marcus's chest swell. For the first time, strangers weren't just curious, they were impressed. By afternoon, the judges had finished their rounds. The projects were left for families and students to explore until the winners were announced in the evening. Marcus sat at his table, exhausted but hopeful. His device had worked every time. No failures, no sparks, no breakdowns. But he wasn't celebrating yet. He knew how these things went. Rockets and robots always won. Kids with money and polished displays always got the attention. Still, deep down, Marcus felt something shift. Even if he didn't win, he had shown them all. The suspense grew as the principal prepared to announce the results. Students gathered near the stage. Parents crowded behind them, and the gym hummed with nervous energy. Marcus gripped the edge of his table, his heart pounding. Whatever happened next, he knew his project had already stunned more people than he ever imagined. The gym grew quiet as Principal Reynolds stepped onto stage, holding a small stack of envelopes. The judges sat behind her, their faces unreadable. Students stood in clusters, whispering nervously, while parents leaned forward in anticipation. Marcus stood near the back with Jamal, clutching his backpack straps so tightly his knuckles turned white. His project was still on the far table, glowing faintly under the overhead lights. It had performed perfectly all day, but now the real test was here, the announcement of winners. Principal Reynolds tapped the microphone. "Thank you all for being here tonight. Each of you has worked hard, and the judges were impressed by the creativity, effort, and innovation on display. No matter what happens, remember, you all accomplished something to be proud of." Murmurs filled the crowd. Marcus's heart thudded against his ribs. He tried to steady his breathing. Reynolds opened the first envelope. Third place goes to Emily Carter for her project on fertilizer and plant growth. Applause erupted. Emily's face lit up as she hurried to the stage, shaking hands with the judges. Marcus clapped too, though his hands trembled. Reynolds opened the second envelope. Second place goes to Ryan Matthews for his model rocket design. Cheers broke out. Ryan grinned widely, raising his arms like a champion as he walked the stage. He looked back at the crowd, his eyes scanning until they landed on Marcus. He smirked. Marcus felt a sting in his chest. If Ryan was second, then who could possibly take first? Surely not him. His project looked too simple, too rough. Reynolds lifted the final envelope. The entire gym seemed to hold its breath. And first place, she paused, smiling at the crowd, goes to Marcus Johnson for his solar-powered energy unit built from recycled materials. The words echoed in Marcus's ears. For a moment, he couldn't move. Jamal shoved him lightly. Bro, that's you. Get up there. The crowd erupted in clapping, gasps, and whispers. Marcus's legs felt like stone as he walked toward the stage, his heart hammering. He climbed the steps, his eyes wide. Reynolds handed him a certificate and a small trophy. Outstanding work, Marcus, she said warmly. You've shown innovation, creativity, and heart. Well done. The judges shook his hand one by one, each offering words of praise. Impressive resourcefulness. Brilliant use of discarded parts. Keep pushing, you have real talent. As Marcus turned toward the crowd, he saw his mother standing in the back, tears streaming down her face as she clapped harder than anyone. Jamal shouted from the audience, That's my boy right there. For a brief, shining moment, Marcus felt the weight of every insult, every whisper, every doubt lift from his shoulders. He had done it. He had stunned them all. But not everyone clapped. Off to the side, Marcus spotted Whitaker. His arms were crossed, his face tight, his jaw clenched. The teacher didn't smile, didn't applaud. His eyes were sharp, almost angry. As the applause died down, and the winners gathered on stage for pictures, Marcus's joy was shadowed by the sight of Whitaker's glare. He knew this wasn't over. After the ceremony, students crowded around Marcus's table. Kids who had laughed at him days earlier now leaned close, asking questions. Can you build one for me? Does it only charge phones? Could you make it bigger? Marcus answered shyly, trying to keep up. For the first time in his life, he wasn't invisible. When the crowd thinned, Tanya rushed him, pulling him into a tight hug. Marcus, I'm so proud of you. You showed them all what you're made of. He smiled into her shoulder. Thanks, Mom. But then Whitaker appeared, stepping close enough that only Marcus and Tanya could hear. His voice was low and cold. Enjoy your moment, Johnson. But one lucky project doesn't change who you are. Don't think for a second you've proved yourself. Tanya's eyes narrowed. Excuse me? He just won first place fair and square. Whitaker's lips curled. The world doesn't hand out trophies for scrap work. He'll learn that soon enough. Before Tanya could respond, he turned and walked away, his shoulders stiff. Marcus's joy dimmed. The words dug into him, just like always. But then he remembered the applause, the glowing bulb, the judges' smiles. He took a deep breath and whispered, He's wrong this time. That night at home, Marcus set the trophy on the kitchen table. Tanya touched it like it was made of gold. This is just the beginning, baby. People saw what you can do. Marcus sat quietly, staring at the trophy. Jamal's word from earlier echoed in his head. People respect fight. Still, something gnawed at him. Whitaker wasn't letting this go. And Marcus had a feeling the teacher might find a way to make things harder from here on. The following week at school, Marcus noticed a difference immediately. Students who never talked to him before now waved in the hallways. Teachers smiled at him. Even Principal Reynolds called him into her office to congratulate him again. Marcus, I want you to know we're very proud of your work, she said. The local paper is writing an article about the fair, and they'd like to feature your project. Marcus's eyes widened. Really? Yes. It's a wonderful example of innovation. Be ready for an interview after school tomorrow. He left the office stunned. Him in the paper? But the shift wasn't all positive. Whitaker's coldness only deepened. In class, he stopped calling Marcus by name, referring to him only as Johnson in a clipped, sharp tone. Whenever Marcus answered a question, Whitaker nitpicked his response, looking for mistakes. One afternoon, as Marcus explained an experiment, Whitaker interrupted. No, that's sloppy. You're skipping key details. A real scientist would know better. The class went silent. Marcus clenched his fist under the desk, the heat rising in his chest. He wanted to argue, but he forced himself to stay calm. After class, Jamal muttered, He's just salty, man. Don't let him crush you. Marcus nodded, but inside, he felt the pressure building again. He had proved himself once, but Whitaker wasn't finished. The article in the newspaper came out 2 days later. The headline read, Local student wins science fair with solar-powered invention built from trash. There was a picture of Marcus smiling shyly beside his wooden box, the bulb glowing beside him. People in the neighborhood congratulated Tanya at the diner, clapping her on the back. Marcus's story spread further than he ever expected. But Whitaker's glare in class only grew darker. And Marcus knew, deep down, that his toughest challenge wasn't the fair. It was surviving the teacher who refused to believe in him. The newspaper article changed everything for Marcus. For the first time, people saw him as more than the poor kid with old shoes. Neighbors stopped him on the street to shake his hand. Kids at school who used to laugh at him now asked to sit near him at lunch. Even some parents who barely noticed Tanya at the diner were suddenly praising her son. But all this new attention came with a cost. Whitaker's resentment grew sharper each day. During science class, he rarely spoke Marcus's name without a sneer. He always found ways to chip at him. Johnson, your handwriting is sloppy. Johnson, don't get ahead of yourself. That's not real innovation. Johnson, you think one project makes you a genius? At first, Marcus tried to ignore him, but as weeks passed, the comments burned deeper. The other students noticed too. Some whispered about how unfair it was, while others smirked, enjoying the tension. One afternoon, Marcus sat quietly in his seat while Whitaker explained a lesson about chemical reactions. Ryan raised his hand. Mr. Whitaker, shouldn't we talk about solar energy too? Since that's what Marcus did. The room fell silent. Marcus froze. He hadn't asked for this, but Ryan's smirk said he knew exactly what he was doing. Whitaker's eyes flicked to Marcus, then back to Ryan. We don't need to waste class time on hobby projects. Real science is about precision, not luck. The word stung. A few students shifted uncomfortably. Jamal clenched his jaw, glaring at the teacher, but Marcus stayed quiet. That night, Marcus sat at the kitchen table, staring at his trophy. Tanya noticed the cloud over his face. What's wrong, baby? She asked. Marcus shrugged. Doesn't matter. Marcus, she pressed, sitting down beside him. Talk to me? He sighed. Whitaker. He won't let up. No matter what I do, he makes me feel like I don't belong. Like what I built doesn't count. Tanya reached over and held his hand. That man is wrong. You hear me? You prove yourself. People saw it. You can't let his bitterness steal your shine. Marcus looked at her. But what if he's right? What if it was just luck? She shook her head firmly. Luck doesn't build circuits. Luck doesn't make light shine from trash. You did that, and you can do even more. Her words gave him some strength, but the doubt still lingered. The next week, Marcus faced a new test. Principal Reynolds announced a statewide science showcase, where schools would send their best students to represent them. The event was bigger than a local fair. It drew attention from colleges, sponsors, even news stations. When the announcement was made in class, the room buzzed with excitement. Marcus's heart pounded. Could he be chosen? Whitaker cleared his throat. Each school can only send 2 students. Selection will be based on merit, not popularity. His eyes flicked to Marcus as he said it. The implication was clear. At lunch, Jamal slapped Marcus on the back. Bro, you have to get picked. Your project already made the paper. Marcus wasn't so sure. Whitaker hates me. He'll do anything to keep me out. Then you fight harder, Jamal said. You don't back down. A week later, Principal Reynolds posted the names on the bulletin board. A crowd gathered. Marcus pushed through, his stomach churning. The list read, Ryan Matthews, Model Rocketry Marcus Johnson. Solar-powered unit, the crowd buzzed louder. Ryan smirked, but Marcus hardly noticed. His name was there. He was going to the statewide showcase. That afternoon, Whitaker called Marcus to stay after class. When the last student left, Whitaker closed the door. He leaned against his desk, arms crossed. You're going to the showcase, I see. Marcus shifted nervously. Yes, sir. Whitaker's eyes narrowed. Don't mistake this for victory. That fair was a small stage. The showcase is different. You'll be up against kids who had real training, real tools, real support. You're walking into a fight you can't win. Marcus's chest tightened. I'll still try. Whitaker smirked. Try all you want. Just don't embarrass the school. And don't embarrass yourself. The words sliced like knives. But instead of breaking, something hardened inside Marcus. He clenched his fists. I'll do my best, he said firmly, meeting Whitaker's glare. The teacher studied him, then turned away. We'll see. At home, Marcus poured his energy into improving his project. He sketched diagrams late into the night, tinkering with wires, experimenting with adjustments. Tanya worried about him burning out. You need sleep too, Marcus, she said one evening. I can't stop now, Mom. If I'm going to the showcase, I have to be ready. I can't let them prove Whitaker right. She brought him a plate of food and kissed his forehead. Just remember, you don't have to prove yourself to him. You just have to prove yourself to you. Days turned into weeks. Marcus spent hours in the garage, the glow of his small bulb casting long shadows on the walls. Jamal often dropped by to help, holding wires or testing connections. One night, while adjusting the solar panel, Marcus accidentally burned his finger on a hot wire. He hissed, jerking his hand back. You okay? Jamal asked. Yeah, Marcus said, shaking his hand. Just a mistake. But I'll fix it. Jamal studied him. Man, you're obsessed. Marcus looked at him, eyes burning with determination. I have to be. This is my chance. Finally, the day of the statewide showcase arrived. The event was held at a massive convention center, filled with students from across the state. Booths lined the halls, each showcasing inventions and experiments. Robots moved across tables. Chemical displays bubbled in beakers. Posters explained complex theories. Marcus stood at his booth, his project polished and glowing brighter than ever. Tanya stood nearby, her face glowing with pride. Jamal tagged along too, snapping pictures on his phone. As Marcus set up, he felt the weight of eyes on him, other students, judges, reporters. The room buzzed with talent and competition. For a moment, his chest tightened with doubt. His project looked so small compared to tower machines and sleek robotics. Then Tanya leaned close. Remember, baby, light shines brightest in the dark. Trust your work. He nodded, gripping the edge of the table. The showcase began. Judges moved from booth to booth, stopping to ask questions. Crowds of parents, teachers, and reporters filled the aisles. When they reached Marcus's booth, he took a deep breath and began to explain his design. He spoke clearly, demonstrating how his invention worked, how it could power basic devices in places without electricity. The bulb glowed steadily, drawing impressed nods. But as he spoke, Marcus noticed something in the crowd. Whitaker, the teacher, stood off to the side, arms crossed, watching closely. His face was unreadable, but his eyes never left Marcus. The tension wrapped around Marcus's chest, but he pushed forward, determined not to falter under that glare. This was his moment. The convention hall hummed with excitement. Judges leaned over tables. Students adjusted wires and posters, and flashes from reporters' cameras lit up the wide room. Marcus's palms were sweaty as he explained his project for the second time. Each word came carefully, his voice steady, but his heart thudding like a drum in his chest. The panel of judges, 3 men and a woman, listened intently. One leaned closer to the solar panel, tracing his finger along the wires. You built this with what materials again? He asked. Marcus swallowed. Mostly scraps, sir, old wires from broken appliances, soda cans with reflective surfaces, and a salvage bulb. My goal was to show that even without expensive tools, energy can be created to help people. The female judge raised her eyebrows. And it works with only sunlight? Yes, ma'am, Marcus replied. He adjusted the angle, letting the panel catch more light from the overhead lamps. The bulb glowed brighter, steady, and strong. A murmur ran through the crowd. Tanya, standing behind the rope barrier, clasped her hands together. Jamal grinned wide, whispering to her, "He's killing it." But Whitaker's expression never changed. He stood with his arms folded, his mouth a thin line. The judges asked more questions about efficiency, about durability, about cost. Marcus answered each carefully. When they finally thanked him and moved on, he released a breath he didn't realize he was holding. You did good, son, Tanya said softly. Marcus nodded, but his nerves didn't ease. The competition was fierce. At the next booth, Ryan's sleek rocket display drew oohs and ahs from the crowd as he explained its launch capacity and altitude. His father, a well-dressed man with silver hair, spoke proudly to reporters nearby. You see the difference? Ryan muttered as he walked past Marcus's booth, his smirk sharp. Scraps versus science. Marcus clenched his jaw, but stayed quiet. He wouldn't let Ryan rattle him. Hours passed as judges reviewed every project. When it was done, an announcement rang through the hall. Finalists will be announced shortly. Please gather in the main auditorium. The tension thickened. Students carried their projects into the large room, where a stage stood at the front with bright spotlights. Rows of chairs filled with families, teachers, and reporters created a buzzing sea of noise. Marcus sat near Tanya and Jamal, his project on the floor beside him. He could feel Whitaker's presence behind them, silent but heavy. The announcer stepped on stage. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you for attending the statewide science showcase. Today, we witnessed remarkable innovation from the brightest young minds in the state. Our judges were impressed beyond words. Now, the finalists. The crowd hushed. First finalist, Ryan Matthews, with advanced model rocketry. Applause erupted. Ryan stood proudly, his father patting his back as he walked to the stage. Second finalist, Leah Carter, with water filtration for rural communities. Another round of applause. A girl in a blue dress rushed up with a wide smile. Third finalist, Marcus Johnson, with solar-powered energy unit. The auditorium buzzed louder than ever. Gasps, claps, even cheers. Tanya jumped to her feet, tears already glistening. Jamal nearly shouted, "Let's go!" Marcus's heart leapt, but he forced himself to walk calmly up the steps. On stage, the 3 finalists stood side by side under the blinding lights. Ryan glanced at him, his smirk replaced with a glare. The announcer continued. These 3 students represent the finest work today. One of them will be awarded the State Innovation Medal and a scholarship opportunity. The room buzzed again. Marcus swallowed hard, his throat dry. Before the winner could be announced, the judges asked each finalist to give one last short presentation to the full audience. Leah went first, explaining how her water filter could help reduce disease in poor communities. Her clear words and calm confidence drew respectful applause. Ryan followed. His voice boomed as he described the science behind his rocket, using technical terms and polished gestures. The crowd responded with loud cheers, especially when his father shouted encouragement from the front row. Finally, it was Marcus's turn. He stepped forward, gripping the microphone with both hands. The bright lights blurred the audience, but he could still see Tanya's glowing face in the crowd. He took a breath. My project is about power, he began, his voice steady. Not just the power to light a bulb, but the power to change lives. Where I live, a lot of people don't always have electricity. Some families go to bed in the dark. Some kids can't study at night because their homes don't have light. So I asked myself, what if there was a simple way to make light using only what's around us? That's why I built this. He gestured to the solar panel, angled toward the stage lights. The bulb glowed to life, shining brightly for all to see. A collective murmur rippled through the audience. Marcus continued, his confidence growing. This is made from scraps. Trash, really. Things people throw away. But it works. And it shows that anyone, no matter how poor, can still build something that makes life better. That's the power I believe in. For a moment, the room was silent. Then applause broke out, loud, rolling, genuine. Marcus blinked against the brightness, his chest swelling. The announcer nodded. Thank you, Marcus. The three finalists returned to their spots. The judges whispered together at a table nearby, their expressions serious. The wait felt endless. Finally, the announcer stepped forward with an envelope. The winner of the State Innovation Medal is... The room held its breath. To be revealed after a short intermission. Please remain seated. A groan spread to the audience, followed by laughter. Marcus's stomach twisted tighter. The suspense was unbearable. During the break, Tanya squeezed his hand. No matter what happens, I'm proud of you, baby. You stood tall. Jamal leaned close. Bro, did you hear that applause? You got this. You really got this. But Whitaker's voice suddenly cut through. Don't get comfortable, Johnson. Marcus turned. His teacher stood behind him, eyes cold. Crowds clap for stories, not science. You'll see the difference soon. Marcus opened his mouth to reply, but the lights dimmed and the announcer's voice returned. Ladies and gentlemen, the judges have made their decision. The winner of this year's State Innovation Medal is... The announcer paused, letting the tension stretch like a rope about to snap. Marcus's chest hammered. Tanya clutched Jamal's arm. Ryan's smirk returned, ready for victory. To be revealed right after this message from our sponsors. Gasps, groans, and laughter again. But for Marcus, the delay was torture. The lights, the whispers, the weight of Whitaker's stare, it all pressed down on him. He took a slow breath. Whatever name came next, he knew one thing. He had stood on that stage, and the world had finally seen him. The lights dimmed again as the announcer returned to the center of the stage. The entire auditorium was silent, waiting for the final moment. Marcus's chest felt like it would burst. Tanya gripped Jamal's hand so tightly he winced, but he didn't complain. Every face in the crowd leaned forward. The announcer opened the golden envelope slowly, deliberately, as if he knew how much tension filled the room. He cleared his throat. The winner of the State Innovation Medal is Marcus Johnson. The room erupted. Cheers, claps, even whistles echoed across the hall. Marcus stood frozen for a moment, his ears buzzing. Tanya shot to her feet, tears spilling down her cheeks as she clapped wildly. Jamal jumped up, shouting, That's my brother. That's my brother right there. Ryan's smile collapsed instantly. His father's proud grin vanished into a tight, angry frown. Leah, the other finalist, clapped politely, though disappointment flickered across her face. On stage, Marcus's legs fell heavy, but they carried him forward. The announcer shook his hand firmly, then lifted his arm high. Ladies and gentlemen, the youngest innovator to show us that hope and progress can come from anywhere. The medal hung heavy around Marcus's neck. Flashbulbs from reporters' cameras blinded him. Questions flew from every corner. Marcus, how did you come up with this idea? What will you do next? How does it feel to win after such tough competition? Marcus swallowed hard, but his voice was steady. It feels like this isn't just for me. It's for everyone who's ever been told they don't have enough. Or they're not good enough. We are enough. The crowd roared again. Behind the applause, Whitaker's face was a storm. He clapped slowly, mechanically, but his eyes burned with something darker than disappointment. His voice carried low, almost a growl, though no one else heard. This isn't the end, Johnson. Marcus caught the look, but instead of shrinking, he stood taller. The award ceremony ended with reporters swarming the stage. Tanya and Jamal managed to reach Marcus, hugging him tightly. Tanya whispered through her tears, You made them see you, baby. You made them all see you. Jamal laughed loudly, spinning his brother around. Man, you just shut up the whole world. They better put your name in the papers tomorrow. Ryan stormed past them, shoving his project into its case. His father barked at him. We'll appeal this, Ryan. They don't understand real science. Don't let this charity project shake you. Ryan muttered something under his breath, but his face was red with anger and shame. He didn't look back at Marcus. As the crowd spilled out of the auditorium, Marcus was pulled aside by one of the judges, the woman with sharp eyes who had asked him about durability. Young man, she said firmly, this project is extraordinary. You've shown us that science isn't just about resources. It's about vision. We're recommending you for a scholarship at the State University's summer program. Marcus's mouth dropped. Me? Really? Yes, she said with a smile, and we'll help you improve this design. With the right resources, your invention could light up entire communities. Marcus's chest swelled. Tanya gasped, covering her mouth. Jamal shouted, "See? I told you." For the first time that night, Marcus felt the weight lift off his shoulders. The long nights of working with scraps, the mocking whispers in class, the shame of being called poor, it all led to this. But just as they left the stage, Whitaker stepped into their path. His voice was low, but his tone cut like glass. "Enjoy your little moment, Johnson. But don't forget, you're still just a poor kid from nowhere. One medal doesn't change that." Marcus locked eyes with him, his fists tightening. For a second, he thought about answering back. But instead, he lifted the medal hanging from his neck, letting it glint in the light. "It changed enough," Marcus said quietly. Whitaker's jaw tightened, his face flushed. Without another word, he turned sharply and walked away. Outside the hall, the cool night air felt fresh and alive. Marcus, Tanya, and Jamal walked together, the medal still warm against Marcus's chest. Reporters trailed them until security cleared a path. Cars honked as families left the parking lot, laughter and chatter filling the night. Jamal threw his arm around his brother's shoulder. "So, champ, how's it feel to be the biggest name in the city tonight?" Marcus chuckled, shaking his head. "It feels like I finally proved something. Not just to them, but to myself." Tanya kissed his forehead. "You didn't just prove something, you changed something. And this is only the beginning." As they reached their old car, Marcus looked up at the night sky. The stars above seemed endless, scattered across the darkness. He thought of the solar panel glowing under the stage lights, and for the first time in his life, he believed he could reach higher than anyone expected. The drive home was quiet, but not the heavy kind of quiet Marcus was used to. It was a quiet of peace, of possibility. When they reached their small apartment, Tanya placed a medal on the kitchen table. Its shine lit up the dim room. She stood back, smiling proudly. "This," she whispered, "is proof that no matter how little we have, we can still rise." Marcus touched the medal, his reflection gleaming in its surface. He thought of his classmates who had laughed at him, of Whitaker's insults, of Ryan's smirk. Then he thought of the crowd's applause, of Tanya's tears, of Jamal's cheers. And he knew one thing for sure, his story was only just beginning. That night, as Marcus lay in bed staring at the cracked ceiling, he didn't feel broken anymore. He felt unstoppable. If you like this story, make sure to like, share, and subscribe. Also and other to strengthen our community. Let us know in the comments where you are watching from and what time you are currently watching this video.